Charles Mitchell, President and CEO for the Commonwealth Foundation. It's where you need to go to find out the nitty-gritty and the background to what's cracking in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And he joins us right now on the Rich Zeoli Show. Charles, welcome back to 1210 WPHT. Thanks for joining us.
It is my pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Is cowardice too strong of a word, not strong enough? I have to tell you, even though you're going to help us navigate the facts of the situation, when it's liberal politicians that love to lecture everyone else on equity, shutting off avenues to opportunity for kids, I have a little bit of trouble controlling my emotions. How about you?
I would say you should let your emotions run free. And if there's one thing worse than picking a fight with a Holocaust survivor, it is utterly disappointing the most underprivileged, vulnerable children in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And you are correct. That is what happened this week. But the most important thing that I want you and your listeners to know about that is, as disappointing and terrible as that was, it is not over. So all those emotions that you feel, you need to channel into the next stage of this fight. There are those, especially those who are in league with the school unions, who want us to believe that this battle is over. That is not true. The Pennsylvania state budget is a package of bills, and they have only mostly completed one out of the package. This is not done, and there are many opportunities to fight and win on behalf of these children.
Can you walk us through briefly, mechanically, how we got here? Because Josh Shapiro made promises to the people of Pennsylvania, to these kids, and now he is fast walking it back. It almost is kind of like when you're a kid, you're playing outside and you lift up a rock and you see all the little gross things squiggling around. That's Pennsylvania politics right now. Can you tell us exactly what happened?
Sure, and I wanted to say too, you were talking about New Jersey earlier, which, of course, as a native of Pennsylvania, I find slightly distasteful, but, I'll go with it because there's a New Jersey...
You have to drive through us to get to the beach. You got to give us that much.
Yes, I know, and sometimes those things are necessary, right? But that's why, you said earlier in the intro that, that I know stuff. Well, I know stuff about New Jersey. Here's what I know about New Jersey. It has a senator by the name of Cory Booker. Cory Booker,
He blocked me on Twitter, by the way, Charles. We have a very complicated relationship. Yeah, I want that on my tombstone, but continue.
Well, and what should go on his tombstone is that he was the featured speaker at an event honoring the cause of school choice, sponsored, among others, by Betsy DeVos, who about a year later was appointed Secretary of Education by the President of the United States. And he turned tail and voted against her. And oh, by the way, one of his colleagues in the Senate from another Commonwealth, Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, wrote in her book about 15, 20 years ago that we should entrust money to children to choose whatever school they want, just like the bill that Governor Shapiro has turned against. And even Barack Obama and Joe Biden, all of them over the last 20 years have turned tail on this issue. So what we're seeing here is a trend. And if you ask me, it's pretty important in this business, in the business of politics, to follow the money. And here's what I'll tell you about the money. Two things. One, the school unions and their friends, the public sector unions, have invested in the last 15 years or so over $200 million to try to take over our politics in Pennsylvania. And when you're trying to understand what's going on this issue, you need to understand that. Here's what you also need to understand. I think they're getting a pretty lousy return on that investment, because all they got for it is a one-vote majority in the House of Representatives of Pennsylvania and a governor who's talking out of both sides of his mouth. If that's what $200 million buys you, they should get a refund. But all that to say, yes, what happened is in the campaign, Governor Shapiro endorsed a concept called Lifeline Scholarships, which is all over a website that you listeners can go to called fundlifeline.com. It explains all of it, but it would be money in an account for the poorest, most vulnerable citizens of Pennsylvania who are being failed by our public school system to find a better school. And so what did people in the legislature do? They enshrined that concept in legislation. They revised it in ways that the governor asked for. The legislation moved through the Senate of Pennsylvania twice, actually, after the governor agreed to it. And then at the 11th hour, he said, you know what, it kind of reminds me of when Nancy Pelosi said we have to pass Obamacare to see what's in it. He said, you know what, I need the House to pass my priority, Lifeline Scholarships, so I can veto it. That's what he said. And it's hard not to associate that with that $200 million that the school unions and their buddies have poured into politics, and the hissy fit that they threw when he even breathed a word about doing what's right for children.
The American people do not have a grasp of how powerful these teacher unions are. I think that if your average voter had a better grasp of the influence they wield, you would see some different results in some of these elections. I know on my side of the river, and the NJEA, which is one of the most notorious unions in the country, this is just lobbying money. This is not money they're actually spending on campaigns, which they spend plenty. $52.6 million on lobbying between 2000 and 2022. An insane amount of cash that's not going to teacher salaries, that's not going to improve the educational experience of some of our most vulnerable kids in places like Camden, New Jersey. It's going towards the teachers unions' efforts to control New Jersey politics. And the same thing is developing in Pennsylvania. What can you do if you're a Pennsylvanian listening to this and you're furious at what Josh Shapiro is up to here, his cowardly turn, and you want to try to let the legislature know that, hey, listen, this is not acceptable, reprioritize?
Well, there's two things you should do. And the first is learn a new name. Most people who are concerned about this issue, and rightly so, are talking about Josh Shapiro, and we can talk more about Governor Shapiro if you'd like. But the person who has really carried the water for the school unions in this battle is a guy named Matt Bradford. He's from Montgomery County. He's the House Majority Leader. He commands a majority of one vote. And he has really been the one leading the fight against Lifeline scholarships. And one of the really deplorable things about that is if you look into what's really going on, in addition to that $200 million that the unions have thrown into politics, Mr. Bradford works for a law firm in addition to his legislative job. And that law firm works on behalf of the very school districts that are lobbying against letting these kids out. In my world, that's a conflict of interest. So thing number one that your listeners need to do is understand that guy is playing a big role and call his office and tell him to quit it. The second thing is go to fundlifeline.com, and that's where Commonwealth Foundation has all sorts of resources that, in addition to giving Matt Bradford and Josh Shapiro a piece of your mind, which is important, the best thing you can do is to give your actual legislators a piece of your mind. And the reason is that there are more bills that still have to be put together and passed in order for Pennsylvania to have a budget. This is not over. There are about half a dozen bills that typically comprise the budget, and a lot of those bills require bipartisan compromise. For example, Governor Shapiro wants to give about $100 million to some preferred school districts that he and his allies, like Matt Bradford, say are underfunded. Well, guess what? If they want to spend that money, if they want to give that out, there has to be another bill that passes the legislature. So what does that mean? That means the Champions for Children have leverage. And even the bill that he has threatened to veto, he can't even veto it right now because a champion for children by the name of Kim Ward, who's the president pro tem of our Senate, is sitting on the bill. I can give you the parliamentary procedure if you want, but the short of it is she's sitting on the bill. Why? Because there are champions for children. She is the leader of them who are not going to let him get away with this, and the fight goes on.
Elections have consequences. It was news, clearly, when the Democrats flipped the lower chamber of the Pennsylvania legislature, and you're seeing right now what that means for the people of Pennsylvania, for the kids of Pennsylvania. I'd love to get your opinion on this, Charles, because, I'm a Republican. I make no bones about that, and I am repeatedly frustrated by Republican politicians who shy away from campaigning on school choice. It's a big problem on my side of the river in the NJGOP. I suspect you've had this issue in Pennsylvania. And every time I confront them and say, listen, this school choice thing, it's a winner. Not only do our voters love it, but there are also plenty of non-traditional conservative voters that can be moved by the plight of kids in school districts that are failing them. I hear the same thing. Well, suburbanites, they think their schools are great and, they perform well by whatever metrics the teachers union comes up with. So, yeah, it's just not a winning issue. Do you agree that it's not a winning issue?
No, I think anybody who says that, to put it charitably, has their head in the sand. Where I grew up in Delco, we have another phrase for it, but I'll spare your listeners that one. I'm sure you know what I'm referring to.
I do.
Okay. I mean, so
as a New Jerseyan that can be a little salty, I find a lot of commonality with people from Delco.
Well,
there are brothers and sisters on the other side of the river.
Preach, my brother. Anybody who tells you that has their head stuck somewhere it shouldn't be. And here's why. That's not just Charles Mitchell's opinion, because who cares? Okay, look at what's happening across the country. All right, just this week, our neighbors in Ohio enacted universal school choice. And you've seen other states that are not, they're not ruby red. Florida, Arizona, which now has a Democratic governor, Wisconsin, a lot of these states have done this, and it has been good. I would even say great politics. Look at the governor of Ohio. He won by like 20 points. Look at the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. He won by a similar margin. In places where politicians have embraced not just boldness, but I would say, the left likes to say they've got a monopoly on social justice. This is social justice. I heard Joe Biden say the other day that the transgender, whatever he wants to call it, is the social justice issue of our time. I think he's full of it. He's full of it. This is the social justice issue of our time. And if people want to say that conservatives or whatever term you want to put on, people like you and me, like, we are the ones fighting for the dispossessed, fighting for those who've been screwed by systems. These people say that they're against systemic racism. These people say Black Lives Matter. These people say all these things. It is this issue that presents the best opportunity of anything we could possibly do through public policy or politics or anything else to transform people's lives. And we're seeing that in other states where there are statesmen rather than politicians who actually pick up this banner and carry it, there are tremendous results, tremendous popularity, particularly over the last 3 years, particularly after COVID and everything like that lifted the curtain on what was going on in so many schools, including, supposedly good suburban schools, where some of those moms and dads saw, oh my gosh, I don't like what's happening here at all. That's the opportunity. That's what Governor Shapiro threw away this past week. But you know what? There are more leaders like Kim Ward or Martina White from Northeast Philadelphia and others in your state capital in Harrisburg. My office is at the foot of the steps. I know what goes on in there. There are leaders in there who are continuing this fight all summer, and we have to fight alongside them at fightlifeline.com. Funlifeline.com, excuse me.
And you absolutely nailed it when you said that if you want to find any example of racism in government that's actually institutionalized in our society and our institutions, it's in the public education system. My point of reference being a Jersey guy is always Camden. That's a place where New Jerseyans, part of the reason we have the highest property taxes in the country is we spend $40,000 a year per kid in that district, and they're not even college ready at the end of their high school tenure. It's absolutely disgusting. It is racist in impact. And I think that's one of the reasons why, just one man's opinion, conservatives need to stop denying that structural racism exists. It does. It exists in these leftist institutions. So I'm with you, unsurprisingly. I think that this is a fight worth picking. Give us that website one more time, and let's do this too, because we just don't want to rail against their narrative. We want to make sure we explain why there's a positive change coming for Pennsylvania children to win this fight. What is the estimated impact of these scholarships if we can make them happen?
I'll put this in real personal terms for you. I recently walked the halls of what is now one of my favorite places in the world, Little Flower High School in the Hunting Park neighborhood of Philadelphia. If you go to the school, the number one thing that you will see in that community is, unfortunately, the overabundance of prostitutes. And the fact that someone would do that should tell you the desperate situation in that neighborhood and how difficult it is for people to survive, that they would go into such a business, so to speak. But when you walk the halls of Little Flower High School, you meet girls of all races, of all kinds, who are loved, who are flourishing, and who, if they had to go to the school down the street, they wouldn't be safe, let alone would they be learning. And there's about 500 girls in that school, but there's space for 2,000. And why aren't there 2,000? Because they can't afford it. And because the scholarship programs that we have right now in Pennsylvania are not sufficient to fill that school, which is why if not if, when we pass Lifeline scholarships, which we will, one way or the other, girls will show up at the door of Little Flower with $10,000 in an account that they can use to pay tuition, to go to a school where they will be safe, where they will be loved, where they will excel, where they will have joy in their eyes, and where they will be able to contribute to our society when they get out. That is the moral righteousness of what this is about. In plain English, it's $100 million to do that, to give that money to those kids, not just in Philadelphia, but in the bottom 15% of schools across our state, which certainly a lot of them are in Philadelphia, but they're all around, and I walk through them in Hazleton and in Pittsburgh and Harrisburg and everywhere else. That's what this is about. It is not over. The state legislature is still going to be working between now and probably September on the package of bills that comprise the state budget. And anybody who's listening to this, you can weigh in. You can tell your lawmaker that you want them to keep up the fight at fundlifeline.com.
And where can we find more from you online, Charles? Because I'm not going to lie. I don't say this to every guest that calls in just to be polite. Your passion for this really is inspiring. We need to bottle it and find a way to get it to the rest of the conservative movement out there so that they can emulate your example. Where can we stay connected?
Well, thank you very much. And there's a couple places you can look this weekend. One is commonwealthfoundation.org. You can sign up for our emails. There's a wealth of information there. Also, if you want to go deeper into this issue and learn about some other families that are benefiting from school choice, go to DelawareValleyJournal.com. I've got a piece up there today on this issue, and one of my colleagues is going to have another piece up there in the next few days. There's also some great stuff at BroadandLiberty.com focused on Philadelphia. Those are all places where you can see more of what we're talking about. And I would just really implore your listeners, we're talking about the next battle in this war. But even after we win this, we've only rescued kids in the bottom 15% of school districts. And at the end of the day, what Pennsylvania deserves, what New Jersey deserves, what New York deserves, what all these places deserve is for every child to have an opportunity. School choice is about school chance. A good school is a chance. It's a chance at a successful life. And one of the reasons why I've dedicated myself to this battle is I believe we win this, then we will do a lot more in Pennsylvania. And oh, by the way, even New Jersey, even New York. If you look at CommonwealthFoundation.org, there's a letter on there with a whole bunch of people from a whole bunch of different states who are watching this fight and who have created an incredible bipartisan coalition to get this done. Why? Because when Pennsylvania takes this step, it'll put pressure on New Jersey. It'll put pressure on New York and on other states in our region to do this. This is the long-term battle, and I would love for those who are listening to join the battle. Initially, the short-term, fundlifeline.com. But if you love this as much as the two of us, CommonwealthFoundation.org. We're going to be fighting this battle for the rest of our lives because it's the right battle to fight for kids.
Charles Mitchell, President and CEO for the Commonwealth Foundation. Words to take forward into the weekend. Great having you. Definitely don't be a stranger.
Thank you so much. This is an incredibly important time to have this discussion, and I look forward to coming back and to continuing to work together. Thank you.